Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers sealed the deal on signing day.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Joining me to recap signing day is the one and only Darrell, Dapprich, Montgomery radio vet, where we're talking about the 7th ranked class in all of college football, regardless of if you look at On3 or 247. The Auburn Tigers finishing 7th in all of college football and 4th in the new SEC since Texas is up there. This is huge, Darrell. When you talk about just 365 days ago, we were rejoicing that we got into the top 20 because of some of the flips that this coaching staff pulled off. And now there's a section of the fan base that's like, oh, we're only 7th? Incredible. Incredible what this staff pulled off and finished yesterday.
Very underrated point. I was thinking about that as well before we went, hit record, that last year we were psyched. I mean, what Hugh Freeze salvaged. Couple things. I said this last year and I'll say it again. It's phenomenal that it's the number 7th ranked class in the country. Couple points, probably could get to the top 5 if a couple things fall Auburn's way at the end of the week. Trevon Reed tweeted that out, that he thinks it's going to be a top 5 class. Second of all, average rankings. Again, the average star rankings, Auburn's 4th in the country. Okay, so it's not about just quantity, where sometimes quantity pulls you up in the rankings, the number of kids you get. I love the average star, the average rating. Auburn's 4th. And then, Zach, do you remember when there used to be years, even when Gus Malzahn had great recruiting classes, and let's give credit, they'd be 10th or 11th in the country, but 8th in the SEC? It was just weird, the way that the cookies
2020 was one of his highest, one may have been his highest class. They were 7th, but they were 5th in the SEC. Yeah.
To get back into the top 4 of the most elite conference in the country tells me that you could be one of the top elite teams in the country. That's what it takes. It takes, in my opinion, to get kids along the lines of scrimmage.
Yes.
It takes top 6, top 5, top 8 classes, and then be in the top 4. And now you're in the top 4 of an SEC that's just expanded. You're top 4 of 16 teams instead of 14 teams. So, it's just it's pretty amazing. And the fact that, again, this conference is the most elite conference there is. To me, the trajectory of Auburn was always going to change when they started getting in the top 3 or 4 in the SEC and back in the top 6 in the country, and then got lines of scrimmage addressed. And all of those check marks were hit.
And Hugh Freeze talked about the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. He feels really good about the 2 offensive linemen that they got. And I love, Darrell, that they didn't take offensive linemen just to take offensive linemen. And there was kind of talk of that maybe 6 months ago. Over the summer, we talked about some offensive line guys that really wouldn't fit in with the rest of the class if Auburn were to have taken them. And I'm glad that they didn't. Because when you look at Dre Carter and Seth Wilford that are coming in, there's a clear path. In fact, I would be shocked if they didn't start at some point at Auburn. I don't think they'll start this year, but at some point during their career at Auburn, you see a clear path of them eventually playing and eventually starting, and I think playing at a high level for both of them. Then the defensive line, holy cow. I mean, an incredible group of young men. And we thought it might have been a little bit better. I mean, sounds like Auburn was in it with LJ McCray until the very end, so much so it made him delay his announcement a little bit in the day. But obviously flipping Amaris Williams, the 4-star from Florida, switching from Florida to Auburn, more of that defensive end, I think. And when you look at like a Malik Blockton and a TJ Lindsey, guys that you knew that you were already going to sign, that you already felt really good about, probably more interior guys. And so I'm glad that they ended up, able to flip a guy that you were competing with in the SEC, because going into signing day, Florida was 1 spot ahead of Auburn, I think both in On3 and the 247 rankings. Clearly that's not the case anymore. Auburn hopped them. But you've got defensive linemen now, several of them, and they all are kind of good at different things. And when you look at the layout of this class, there's so much balance across all of it. I mean, it's almost like they got a mini team because it's so spread out across positions outside of wide receiver, but you can play a bunch of receivers at the same time. I love this class, Darrell. This is the best class Auburn's had in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a stat. I think that Auburn got the number 1 rated player in Mississippi, North Carolina, and Alabama. I mean, that's pretty impressive from a recruiting standpoint. The lines of scrimmage, you got a guy like Waller who plays, on the outside. You got a guy like Williams who plays edge or jack. I mean, they just really did a good job of diversity. Blockton, who we talked about early on when he signed or committed, he could probably put on some weight and move inside. His coach, high school coach Granger Shook, confirmed that. So the diversity of this class, you need some guys in the secondary. Boom, you got them. You need some linebackers, which I think, holy crap, did they get some linebackers? Defensive line, and look, you make a great point about DeAndre Carter and the Wilfred kid. Connor Lew played significant snaps this year as a freshman. So if Connor Lew can, who's to say that a guy like DeAndre Carter couldn't, who probably is a little bit more polished or further along, especially going to modern day high school. So yeah, I don't think they'll have to because of the depth along off or the starters at offensive line. But when we talk about missing on guys in the portal, who's to say DeAndre Carter wouldn't be just as good or better than some of these guys you were going after in the portal to be a backup or to provide depth? He's a stud. He's one of the few guys that as an offensive lineman to say that kid may play significant snaps on the offensive line. And then of course the receivers, the best receiving class that Auburn has ever signed. And I heard somebody say that I really, really trust and I really respect. It used to be on a coaching staff at LSU that mentioned at the end of the day, all the hype, and I love Perry Thompson and I love Cam Coleman, that all the hype that they get, that at the end of the day, he feels like Bryce Kane may be the dude that by the time he's a senior has his biggest mark. I don't know if that's the case. The only reason why I bring it up is to say, look how balanced, look how deep and special this class is. When you talk about a kid that's a 4-star, perhaps overtaking 2 5-star, it's that good. It's that good.
It's all about just the overall talent going up. I mean, obviously Perry Thompson and Cam Coleman are huge, but they're also huge because it makes Bryce Kane and Malcolm Simmons your 3rd and 4th best receivers in this class, which makes your whole roster better. There's no question about it. There's a popular guy on Twitter. His name is Kyle on Twitter. I don't know him personally, but he's got a ton of followers and he's pretty active and he says a lot of good stuff. One of the things he pointed out was the average player ranking in this year's class. I believe it's 90.25. And he points out that in the 2 years under Brian Harston, the 2 years of the potato famine, he had just 2 players over that.
Yeah, over the average, he just had 2 players. I saw that tweet.
Which is crazy. He had 2 years to do it. It's insane, but it really shows how just the level of talent is ticking up. And it's not going to happen overnight. The transfer portal helped a little bit this past season. I think this offseason, and we'll see what they do with the rest of the portal window. But the overall level of talent is trending up. And that's all that matters. You stack 2 or 3 of those back to back to back, the program's where it needs to be, or at least a lot closer. So that was pretty eye-opening when I saw that.
I think one of the greatest things I heard today and really made a lot of sense, and it's an explanation for some of the people that thought Auburn missed on a lot of guys in the portal early, or was it Hugh Freeze says we wanted this group of high school kids and these recruits in this recruiting class to feel like the focus was on them and the attention was on them. Yeah. Now that that's over and behind Auburn, all the attention and chasing and pursuing can go back to the portal because they just didn't want this class to feel slighted. They wanted to feel like they were the full focus. Now that the ink is dry, watch how hard Auburn's fixing to hit the portal.
Yeah, and we'll talk about portal plans maybe in tomorrow's episode. We'll focus fully on this class like this coaching staff did on today's show. I want to talk about my best moment of the day. Darrell, I want to get your best moment of the day as well, because I think something happened in front of all of us, and I don't know if everybody caught it. We'll discuss that in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. Darrell, you have used LinkedIn Jobs as you are the president of your company, and you're over hiring, and LinkedIn Jobs, you've used them before. It makes the whole process a lot easier.
It really does. It gives you so much information. They do the background checks for you, screening. You have a lot of detailed job history. I think the biggest thing that I've learned, Zach, is the matching. I think that they don't even recommend candidates that aren't going to be a good fit. And that takes a lot of the legwork out for me so that I can enjoy things like company Christmas parties.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Or recording podcasts from your office, which is great. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Of course, terms and conditions apply. Darrell, I think the biggest moment, and there were a lot of really good moments, and I think you can make the case that Amaris Williams flipping was one of them. I think you can make the case that the big picture at the end of the day, like none of your guys flipped, but I'm going to zero in on Perry Thompson. I think there was a stronger push from Alabama than anybody from the Alabama side would like to admit. And I think Perry Thompson first grabbing that Auburn hat, putting it down, grabbing that Alabama hat, making it touch his head, and then throwing it across the room and revealing the Auburn jersey underneath his jacket. I think that was symbolic of a lot of things, because how many times have we seen this where it's a TJ Yeldon or a Reuben Foster? Reuben Foster didn't go up to the signing day, but so many times we've seen a guy that was a surefire Auburn guy, and Alabama sweeps into the last second and takes them away. And I think Hugh Freeze kind of called him out a little bit. He didn't say it directly, but I think he said enough where it was clear if you were paying attention, and kind of said, hey, there are folks that, try to do things the night before, and, that may not be the way you want to do things, and all of that. I think Perry Thompson took his shot. I think Hugh Freeze took his shot. And I think Auburn looked up north to Tuscaloosa and says, you're not doing this anymore. You're not. Sorry. Maybe the old Auburn, but Auburn's getting back to where it needs to be. And that was a huge step in doing that.
It was my biggest moment of the day too. And the reason why is I'm going to be very transparent. Me and you, I don't care what Alabama fans say, we know differently. We had some information last night and was getting text and getting part of a group chat that was very concerning. It was very concerning. I went to bed last night. Yeah. I went to bed last night worried, and here's why. Perry Thompson, in my opinion, from a 5-star standpoint, I think Walker White got the train rolling because of how absolutely great recruiter he is and what an ambassador for Auburn. But when Perry Thompson flipped, and then, all those others he set the tone.
Yeah.
It would have been, to me, that's why I went to bed last night with all the intel that we had, very concerned with the push. Two nights ago. Yeah, sorry. 2 nights ago.
The night before signing day.
Yes. That the optics of Perry Thompson flipping back to Alabama and Auburn losing him after getting him from a flip were worse to me than the whole. Like, I felt like if I would have been given a choice and someone said, what's better for Auburn or could it be worse for Auburn? Perry Thompson flipping back to Alabama or KJ Bolden flipping from Florida State to Auburn, the Perry Thompson optics would have looked worse. You see what I'm saying? I mean, KJ Bolden wasn't committed to Auburn. That, to me, was the most crucial commit to hold on to in this class. The way it looked, who he would have flipped to matters, and that he was the first kind of 5-star that got the ball rolling. When that happened today, and the way he did it was legendary too. When that happened today, it was the most important moment and the best moment of the day. I honestly, I sighed. I had a big sigh of relief. I mean, I just was concerned. And it was very important that he kept to his commitment and that he didn't flip back.
And props to this coaching staff, Auburn football's social media and creative team. They showed, I guess, part of the celebration, and Marcus Davis, the wide receivers coach, was certainly a big part of that. And he should have.
The Twitter campaign was huge too. I ain't gonna lie to you. I mean, I know people underestimate that kind of stuff, but a lot of love was shown to him last night and appreciation for getting this thing rolling. I think that matters.
Right. Yeah. And so many folks wanted to, of course, pick at that and say, well, it wasn't just Perry Thompson. Walker White was a big part of it. And it's like, yeah, okay. Like, that's not the point. The point was everybody was loving on Perry Thompson the night before signing day. Let people do it. There was a reason why people were doing it.
Because there was concern. I mean, let's just be honest. There was.
And so other moments that I thought were pretty cool. I mean, it was just kind of, it was cool seeing, and you can say this every year, but it just felt different this year for some reason. Every time there was a signing, and the order kind of surprised me. I don't know why. I just pictured Walker White just waking up and sitting in his NLI and they announcing it like right at 6 a.m. I don't know why I pictured that. I just did. But it was cool seeing all of these come in. And it's like, we've been following these kids for so long. And it's like, finally, like the joy on their face. Cam Coleman's was pretty cool. Like there's a picture montage that somebody put on Twitter where he's like mean mugging, straight face. And then as soon as he gets done signing the signature, just like the smile that came out. And it's like, we're excited for these kids, but they're way more excited to come here than we are, seeing them just because this is their dream. This is their dream. And seeing it come true was pretty neat.
Well, Hugh Freeze alluded to it, and I 100% agree. When you recruit a kid, you're also recruiting their family. In some cases, that's good. And as we know, in some cases, that can be bad.
Sure.
And you dodge a bullet. But I think that he was very, very, detailed and very direct in his praise of the kind of kids he felt like this class was made up of and the families they came from. And I could just be focused in on it, and it could just be a coincidence, but it just seemed to me that these families this year that were surrounding these kids were just as big a part of this process and so excited and so visible with this process. You got Riddick's grandma, you got Walker White's mom, who we've come to love, all that whole family dynamic of it truly is, you're recruiting the whole body, the whole family. So that was special. I think that was the other special moment for me. Not to sound corny, it just seemed like, I agree with Hugh Freeze. He recruited good kids that came from good families.
What was your reaction when Amaris Williams made it official and announced he was flipping for Florida to Auburn?
I think, the fact that he was a number 1 rated player in North Carolina, he was another defensive lineman, and you get him from Florida, it was to me kind of like the cherry on top. I felt like, well, number 1, that takes you from 10 to 7 or 8 or whatever. So it gets you into the top 10. So that's why that's really, really big. That commitment moved Auburn from 10 essentially to 7. And I think that's something that can't be understated. I like the player that he is, and I like that he was a flip. You got 3 flips last year, 4 this year. It's going to have to happen. That's what the elite programs do. They come in and poach. They come in and poach late night.
Auburn took care. Auburn took care of their guys, which is
they held off theirs. Auburn did not lose anybody to a flip. They didn't.
Right.
They flipped 4. They did not, and they almost flipped a couple more, but they did not lose anybody. And that's big. That really retention is big.
Collins, technically didn't sign with Auburn, who is a commit, but that has been kind of done behind the scenes for a while. It seems like so. Just touching on the technicalities here. As far as SEC schools that finished ahead of Auburn, Georgia, Alabama, and Texas, which that felt weird to say out loud, but yes, Texas is an SEC team now.
Could you imagine though? That's so, we don't need to just glaze or gloss over that. Let's just say it was last year. Okay, let's just say it wasn't the new SEC and it was the SEC we've come to live with. The 2 perennial powers that are winning national championships and always in the playoffs.
Yeah.
1, 2 you expect, and bam, there would have been Auburn right there at 3.
It's insane. It's insane.
That's heady company right there.
But you just look at the teams around where Auburn finished, right? And this is an Auburn team that so many people outside of Auburn want to point at and say, oh my gosh, 6-6. Oh my gosh, New Mexico State. Oh my gosh, 4th and 31 against Alabama to lose it.
Stop.
And it's like, but that's the narrative, Darrell, is like Auburn's not getting anything going. And clearly that's a load of what, clearly.
Right.
Or you don't accidentally finish with this class the way that you did. I mean, Auburn is just behind. The only reason Oregon's ahead of Auburn is because they've got 5 more commitments. That's the only reason Oregon's ahead. And that's a top program in college football right now. They were in the race for the college football playoff. They're ahead of Oklahoma. who believes that they're going to come in and they've got all that momentum and excitement around the program. They have finished ahead of a Florida State that just finished an undefeated season. And they probably have the easiest path to the college football playoff than anybody else in college football next year. They finished ahead of Notre Dame. They finished ahead of an LSU team that's coming off of an SEC West championship last year. And they've got Heisman Trophy winners and are about to put a bunch of guys into the league. I mean, just the perspective of who Auburn outperformed this entire recruiting cycle. We just don't need to gloss over it. Like you said, 4th in the SEC, 7th in all of college football. Yeah, you missed out on KJ Bolden. Yeah, you missed out on LJ McCray. And we'll see what happens with some of the offensive linemen that are announcing post early signing day. But it was a win. It was a win. And don't let anybody tell you that it wasn't.
Yeah, a great point on the LSU thing. I'm glad you brought them up because when we talk about rarefied air and it always being Alabama and Georgia, there always seemed to be another SEC team that got into the top 5 in the country and would be third.
Yeah, right.
And it would be LSU. They had great recruiting classes, or then that one year that Jimbo had that class that he couldn't do anything with, and I think ended up 2nd or 3rd in the country. So for Auburn to kind of just leapfrog those schools, you think about, I guess A&M's having to pay that buyout, so maybe they don't have the NIL money they would have had if Jimbo Fisher was still there. But still, that's a traditionally rich, oil-rich program. LSU's got a ton of money, and Auburn just leapfrogged both of them.
Yeah, A&M only has 16 commits, so they're farther down. So,
yeah.
I think that's worth noting.
They got a big flip from a Florida kid. But yeah,
who didn't flip a Florida kid, though, right? Like, who didn't flip a kid from Florida?
Absolutely. Yes. I think the Citadel just did. The Citadel just signed.
Yeah, talk about that LinkedIn read earlier. G5 Billy, he better make a LinkedIn account.
He better. Exactly. I guess when we have time to reflect and when the transfer portal madness is over, we'll talk about later on another show. We have time to reflect on this, even if this class is done, even if an Eccles or an Edwin doesn't get added, just phenomenal. I mean, again, in my lifetime as being an Auburn fan, I've never seen anything like it. And I get that there's been classes that have been ranked 6th or 7th, but go back and again, look at the average star rating and it's just, it'll blow you away.
It's different. It looks different on paper. It looks different when you look at the kids individually. It scores different. This is an awesome
and
class.
Doesn't have a running back in this class. Typically, when you get a highly rated class, you have a really 4-star high. Auburn's done that with a Cadillac Williams.
Yeah,
or
they could have had a 4-star. They could have kept Fat Burnett if they wanted to.
Exactly. What would have happened there? They would have definitely moved up because they would have been added another body, and his rating was high. So
yeah,
I mean,
you're right.
That's an underrated point too. And
maybe you would imagine Oregon, maybe your top 6 class.
But when do you see a class that's top 7, top 8 that doesn't have a high profile running back? I mean, that's hard to do.
Yeah, you're right.
And they did. And you're
right. But really, if you want to talk about just a certain offseason making your team better, your running back is another year of Jarquez Hunter. You know what I mean? That's really what it is. That's the only reason it didn't take one, because Jarquez is staying. And so, I think that's a big part of it. I think it's a big part of it. And that's the stuff that doesn't show up on rankings. I mean, when you just look at Eugene Asante, Keontae Scott, all these guys coming back, it's big.
And remember last year, this class had Jeremiah Cobb, but they didn't have it for sure till February. He was a February signee. That's kind of interesting to think about that, how that would have been pins and needles this year.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Amidst all the craziness, Auburn got a new guy via the portal. Hugh Freeze announced that at his presser yesterday. We'll talk about him in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is the best place to wager on all of your sports action. Darrell, right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. With the announcement of Taulia Tagovailoa opting out, Auburn went from a 2.5-point favorite to a 7-point favorite on FanDuel. He was the most important player in the game, and he is no longer there. So if you think Auburn wins by more than a touchdown, head over to FanDuel. Or if you don't think they will, head over to FanDuel and put your money where your mouth is. Once again, head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off your sports winnings this bowl season, this holiday season. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Darrell, Auburn adds Duke linebacker Dorian Mousey And this is a dude who's just played a ton of football. He's got like several hundred snaps all 4 years at Duke. And this is a guy that brings a bunch of experience to a room that already had a bunch of experience. But all of a sudden you look at it and it's a very, very deep room with Eugene Asante coming back. Dorian Mousey now brings over 1,000 snaps of game reps into this room. I don't expect Cam Riley to go anywhere. Austin Keys is still on this team. This is just a really veteran linebacker room.
I love it. This kid had 32 career starts. I don't remember if it was against Florida State or another opponent that they may have played that was a high-level opponent, but I saw he had 15 tackles in a particular game. Not solo, but 15 tackles.
Yeah.
Look, it's people were trying to compare it to a transfer portal like what happened with Larry Nixon. I guess the difference to me is this kid made 32 starts for a Power 5 school.
Yeah.
He played Clemson. He played Florida State. He played Notre Dame. I mean, played some good schools. And so I love it. I mean, I think he'll get snaps, significance. I mean, how do you start 32 games? They're going to find a place for you on the field. They're going to find
Darrell in 2021. He played 736 snaps on defense.
See, I mean, you're going to use him.
How did that happen?
Yeah, that probably goes to show you how thin Duke was at linebacker. But with Keys and Asante, like you said, though, this is great depth, and the kid will play. He'll see some snaps. He'll get in some sets, and I like it. It's a nice pickup.
I saw the comparisons to Larry Nixon, and I get it. A guy who's played a ton. I think this looks more like Austin Keys a year ago because Keys played a lot of snaps and you looked at his tape and it's like, this guy's good. His grades stink. Analytics grades, not academic grades. I'm sure he's very smart. He's probably a graduate from Duke. He's probably very smart. But as far as like what Pro Football Focus and a lot of the analytics, the grades that they gave Austin Keys at Ole Miss, it wasn't good because Ole Miss's defense stinks. His grades at Duke aren't very good when you look at the PFF grades and defensive grades and all of that. But Duke's defense stunk a lot of those years, despite Mike Elko being this coach that a lot of people propped him up to be. Don't really get that. But I think this guy's a solid addition. It's a 1-year rental, and I think he can kind of set the tone. And I think DeMarcus Riddick and Joseph Phillips can ask him a bunch of questions and make them better over the course of their Auburn career. I don't know. I like it for several reasons.
I do too. This is becoming now a position of strength for Auburn, where it was a big question mark last year.
Is it the deep, outside of running back, is linebacker the deepest position group on the team?
Yes. Yeah. And it's also got elite guys coming in. You've got elite recruits besides wide receiver. It's the best position group in the recruiting class. So you've got guys that are coming back with Riley and Keys and Asante and now Mousey. And then you bring in 3 thoroughbreds from the recruiting class to learn behind them that doesn't have to play significant snaps right away. That's huge. So I like this signing. I like it for more than just a depth piece. I like it that he'll contribute and he'll make some plays because he's used to it. He made a lot. 32 career starts in Power 5 football is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, and just talking to a few guys that cover Duke, I wouldn't be shocked if off the field we see a little bit of you, Elijah McAllister, just as far as like solid young man, a guy that you don't mind representing your university. Wouldn't be shocked if we saw some of that too.
Could he make an appearance at SEC Media Days?
I doubt it.
Well, we didn't think Elijah McAllister would either.
Yeah, I think Hugh Freeze has his guys a little bit more. Now, in fact, if Peyton Thorne's not one of them, that would surprise me. If Jarquez Hunter's not one of them, it would surprise me. And if Eugene Asante's not the third one.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot of senior veteran leaders coming back that he didn't have last year.
Or Keontae Scott. Like, no, I don't think any incoming transfers go.
Jason Jones. I mean, there's some candidates.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
So, but still, I think he could still be a solid leader for this room. No question about it. Fun. Signing day is more fun now than it used to be. Thank you for recapping it with me, buddy. How can people check out everything that you've got going on?
Follow me on X, DAP6410. Obviously, we do live basketball postcasts, and I think I'll be back on with you again sometime this week, right?
Yeah, I think tomorrow, right? Can you do tomorrow? You coming back tomorrow?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah,
So
I'm going to go back to that.
Be sure to click that subscribe button so you know to come back here and like the video. And we'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.